Hey everybody, welcome back to Exit Podcast. Today's special guest is Andrew Howlett, CEO at Struck, a Salt Lake City-based ad agency, and one of my all-time favorite agencies, at least here in town. So, hey Andrew, welcome to the show. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Good to be here. Thanks for having me and taking the time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you for making the time for us. I know you're a busy
And
guy.
thanks for being a fan of Struck. Always love it when we find
You know,
find a
yeah,
fan.
yeah. Struck has always been one of probably my top two or three agencies, and in fact, as I understand it, some of the history here in Salt Lake predates me a little bit, but as I understand it, Struck and a couple of the others that I care or that I was always sort of fans were sort of all derivative of Struck. So there were people who were early in the company and spread out and started their own agencies. And there's just a design aesthetic that went with most of them, and all three or four or however many there are now that have spun off of either Struck or maybe Struck is one of these spinoffs. They, I don't know, persist or are consistently some of the best in town, or at least some of the best work I've seen. So,
Yeah,
congrats on that.
there's
I'm a
yeah,
fan.
yeah, there's definitely like two or three out there that are sort of the Struck spin-out, folks that left and then ended up working together and creating a new agency, and they're all great. I mean, there's some really great
Yeah, yeah, I think it really
talent.
speaks to the level of talent that Struck recruits and the kind of people they bring in to build their products and work for their customers. And yeah, I mean, even there's only been one or two times in my career where I was kind of looking for work. Struck was one I'd looked at, and I actually know a number of people who ended up going there. So
Yeah,
so anyway, it's very cool, and I'm excited to talk to you. Just sort of ad based here in Salt Lake City, sort of close to home, kind of cool.
yeah,
So,
yeah, great.
Andrew, why don't you give us a quick kind of breakdown of your work history, how you got into Struck? I think at one point you had a software agency in Nicaragua, of all places.
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
isn't that normal? Isn't that like most
Yes,
people do?
totally. You know.
Yeah, so I actually came out of school, wanted to do finance, and I started doing finance. Had a first job, second job, and realized I didn't like finance, which was a problem. And it was early .com days and e-commerce days, and I started to build. I wanted to just figure it out and see, and so I started to build something there. And as it happens, you start to hire a couple of developers to work for you, software programmers, and then next thing you know, people are saying, "Hey, can I hire your guys? Can they work on this project for me?" And that's really kind of how. And I ended up teaming up with somebody, and we started an agency, Rain. Ran that. I sold that in 2018. And when I sold it, it was primarily a tech and innovation firm. And among other things, we had developers in Nicaragua. And their role at that point in time was just to support our RAIN projects. As part of that deal, I actually kept the development arm down in Nicaragua and have since grown that now to, I think we're just under 100 people between Nicaragua and Argentina. So that's called Nicasource, and it's primarily it's a staff augmentation business, and an amazing talent in Latin America, and incredibly creative and wonderful team there. And in 2019, there was an opportunity to come to Struck, and I was able to buy out some of the previous founders and owners here at Struck, and took over in 2019. And which was a lot of fun, especially given that my previous agency was a lot of tech and innovation, software development, which is creative in its own way and very can be incredibly creative. But sort of the visual creative was not our strong suit at Rain, and so to come here and see the creativity level of the team and work around these people, it's just I can't draw a stick figure that looks good, and these guys are, and women are doing amazing things every day, and so it's been a lot of fun. And one of the more recent things, we can talk more about it later on in the conversation, as we've kind of split the business just a little bit. Not really, we're same P&L, but we have a structure which speaks to the deep experience that Struck has had over the years of doing physical space design, physical creative spaces for companies big and small. So that's just sort of we're calling it a separate discipline because people were having a hard time understanding. Wait, you guys do branding and campaign work, and you build buildings, or help build buildings or design buildings, and so it's just a little easier to describe it that way, and it's been very helpful, and very excited about that piece of the business as well.
That's
Yeah, one of the
incredible.
things that I think's really interesting, just given your experience and background, and this is the people that even in my own experience as a guy in agency, and having worked with other agencies over the years, is it seems like the best leadership are folks kind of like yours, kind of like you, that are sort of these multidisciplinary people who don't necessarily come from agency. They're creative in different ways. And actually, I mean, it's a big foundation of this podcast at all. I mean, what we call these eggs or these little innovations or these little moments of clarity that business owners have and things like that. And what we've come to understand is that creativity comes in basically every form, right? Some people apply it towards business
Mm-hmm.
development. Some people design ads, but the juice is the same, right? And so,
Yeah.
so in your case, you come from a dev tech background, which I have to imagine has led into sort of a good place to be in advertising, marketing services in terms of just technology moving forward, and maybe sort of what's next in terms of agency stuff. So I wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of how your sort of background, even though if somebody was just looking at it on paper, it might seem kind of disparate. It actually is perfectly honed for this kind of work.
Yeah. Having a foundation in finance has been incredibly helpful for me and for the businesses that I've been part of and run. Because to your point, a lot of folks, and I have a tremendous amount of really great friends who are run agencies, own agencies, and their background was maybe they were a designer or a videographer or they came from that route, which is great, but they didn't necessarily have that background. So then there are a lot of moments where they find themselves, what do I do? How do I handle this scenario or situation? And so just that piece I think has been incredibly helpful for me because I can look at things differently, and also I can look at it from the client perspective. Sometimes we have clients that ask us questions or have needs or maybe specific sort of timelines. And when you understand, maybe, okay, here's why they're saying that, here's why they need to do that, because from a financial perspective they have this constraint or this opportunity or this budget that is still there. It helps to be able to speak their language at times that otherwise maybe don't. Sometimes, especially creatives tend to be like, well, why are we doing it? Why is it this way? Well, it's helpful to understand that. And then, when it comes to technology, innovation is one of those words that is sort of thrown around all the time. But innovation can be processes, it can be products, it can be, a new desk type, it can be the technology in the sense of software development or AI, whatever it is. And so having that and understanding, I think that has been so helpful for me to be able to then again infuse that into the conversations we're having with clients, and even conversations here with the team at Struck, to be able to just say, hey, this is how that fits in. This is how we can fit in and how we can bring even more value, because we can plug in with these pieces of what their business is and their needs and their the opportunities that they see. And sometimes it's big idea stuff that doesn't really go anywhere, but clients appreciate the thinking, as you guys know. I mean, they appreciate the thinking, they appreciate that, and oftentimes that spurs them on to maybe some other ideas or paths that help them out.
Yeah, well, and I can even speak to a couple of those aspects. I mean, one, in so when we moved to Utah in the first place, I was working in an agency here called Thomas Arts, and
Mm-hmm.
I was one of the few guys at the time. I don't know how they're configured these days, but back at the time, that could sort of bridge the gap technically between their development teams and their creative teams. So I was a creative director at Thomas Arts and art director over there. And so I worked on the art side, but I was one of the few people that spoke web programming, at least to some extent. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a pro, but I'm just old enough to have had to build some websites over the years.
It's that MySpace
And
page. It gets
exactly
you every
right.
time.
You got to learn some HTML. So anyway, so I mean, being sort of multidisciplinary is my point. Like I came from being a self-employed freelancer who just kind of would catch as catch can as things came in, right? So on the creative side, and that led to a really diverse set of skills. So by the time I finally partnered up with Thomas Arts, I was a very diverse guy. I wasn't just a guy that went to art school to learn to draw so that I could come come in as an art director or something. So I had a different skill set. So that was really valuable for me. But then to just sort of complete the point or to circle back around to what you said, I'm one of those creative guys that then went out to try and start my own little agency as a guy who began life as a designer and was missing a lot of the finance and missing a lot of sort of the business centric stuff that the one needs to be really successful in the agency. And actually, I think it's hamstrung our business over the years, which is just, from a decision making standpoint or other things like that, I just don't have the foundation of so many people. And so, so I think that that's a really interesting point, just how, starting with some finance and everything works into, building a better business. I want to talk about, so you mentioned innovation, and
Mm-hmm.
innovation can mean a lot of things, whether it's technological or otherwise. But one of the things that you've started to get into is, at least sort of philosophically, this notion of brand transformation. And I
Mhm.
wonder if you could kind of, illuminate us on what you're talking about when you're talking about brand transformation. And I think that this philosophy may sort of lead into some of your environmental work that you're doing now.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, I mean, we could talk about this, and I'm sure the three of us could riff on it for hours and hours and hours, just because it is such a deep topic. But as I was looking at it, and I think this probably even speaks a little bit to the point of my technology, a little bit of the technology and software background. You look at sort of how I look at it is business transformation has been around forever. The first, you know, cave dweller that maybe had grew a little extra crops and decided to start trading for some extra something from the cave next door. That's a business transformation, and that's where you have your McKinseys and your Deloittes and your big sort of consulting businesses. Cicero here locally here in Salt Lake, and so business transformation has been around a long time. Digital transformation has been around now, call it whatever, 20, 25 years. But really in earnest, I'd say the last 15 ish. And when we talk about digital transformation, we're really saying the standardization of the processes and systems that people are using, that it's not their core business. These are supporting tools and supporting products that help them deliver whatever it is that they do. Well, through a lot of that, and especially the digital transformation, we ended up with a kind of a sea of same. You know, for a lot of years, you'd open up any airplane mobile app, and they literally all were exactly the same. Why? Because they were all licensing and using the same technology platform. You went to a lot of websites, and they all looked exactly the same. Why? Because they were all using the same platforms. So it was hard to stand out and stand apart from the crowd. And so it was the opportunity and the time that everybody needed to start looking at their brand and how do they tell a story. All are important. All are, I would say, equally important. They're not, one is not more important than the other, but they're the three legs to the stool is how I look at it. Is, really they all need to be there to support the business. But the part of the iceberg you see and the part that the clients, they're your customers, your potential clients, whoever, is the brand, is that experience. It's that, what you're seeing on the surface for the most part. I doubt, I mean, I'm sure that's happened once or twice out there, but I doubt anybody's ever bought a product from somebody because they, opened up and view source and source code and were like, man, that is the most beautifully written source code I've ever seen. I got to buy their product, right? Now, it's important.
Yeah.
It's got to function. It's got to be, it's all part of the experience, but it's an emotion that's created. And this is, I think, where I'm really passionate about it is we make decisions more often than not, almost exclusively off of an emotion that we feel, whether that's sadness and we decide to, give Sarah McLaughlin some money to help, support dogs and pets and animals. If it's, an excitement for a team. And so you go buy a team t-shirt, whatever. So you feel an emotion and you have to have some sort of an experience that drives that emotion that then drives an action. And in our world, that's what it's all about: is we have to drive an action for our clients that work with us, whatever that is, a visit, a click, a like, a share, a purchase, whatever. And that comes from that emotion. That comes from, that sort of experience. And so, then you can stand apart. You can have a unique experience. You don't have to look like everybody else. You can tell a different story and not be viewed as just, oh, well, they're exactly the same. Now, again, if your business processes and your back end systems aren't working right, clients are, your customers are just not going to be happy and they're not going to like it. So they all have to work in tandem. And it's also not something that you can just set it and let it go. It has to be revisited constantly, all three of them. And so, it's sort of like the three legs to the stool, but or the three circles in the middle is that sort of really optimized part of where your business can be if you're addressing all of those. And so that's where we come in, is really focused on that and the opportunities that brings for everybody.
Like that. So your background in finance has obviously kind of helped you with Struct and in that degree, and I'm sure part of that had to do with RFPs back in the day. But from your show notes and from your bio, you have a quote talking about the death of the RFP movement. I assume that that's quite the process. Ryan and I were kind of discussing it a little bit. I don't have a background in the ad agency world. I'm an audio nerd and I do stuff like that. But he was telling me what RFPs were and how a, a design agency can rack up a $40,000 bill just putting one together and then not even get the job. Can you maybe tell us what an RFP is, why you hate them, and what you're doing differently at Struct?
Yeah, so the RFP, the request for proposal, is was for the longest time, and still is in a lot of industries, particularly sort of government or maybe not for profit entities, is the standard. So you put out the RFP, and oftentimes it's a cattle call. In an ideal world, they would at least go and say, "Hey, we're going to only reach out to these three who we've already looked at, who are a potential match." Well, I should say in the ideal world is they actually just go and do their homework and see who they could potentially work with that is good, and then you start to have a conversation with them. But the RFP, you're exactly right. $40,000 easy, and in fact, there's been some reports out that were. I think it was that 4A's put out something that talked about how much money is spent every year between the client side as well as the agency side, and it's in the billions of dollars
That's
is
crazy.
spent on this RFP process. And the challenge for us and for everybody is, first of all, we don't really have visibility into uh, what they're really looking for, or what they're really after. More often than not, if you've been in this industry for any amount of time, they probably already have somebody chosen. It's they're required to do an RFP. They're required to have three bids to take back, and they've already chosen somebody else. So if you're being invited in and the incumbent is still there and has been asked to bid again, then I think that the chances, there's some stats out there that are pretty well known. David Baker's put out some stuff on it that it's like, your chance is about 10% chance of winning that thing, which is just ridiculous. And so you spend all that money, you take all that time, all the investment that comes between man hours and actual cost, and then you get nothing out of it. So what we really push for now, and when somebody calls and says, "Hey, we're putting out an RFP and we'd like to include you in it," our first response is, "Hey, well, we typically don't respond to RFPs." And which usually takes some people a little off guard, but we typically don't respond to RFPs. So, can we have a conversation and just see what you're looking for, and if it's even a fit for us, and if we're a fit for you? If they say no to that, then we typically say, "Okay, well, thank you, and we're going to pass." Because if they're not truly willing or interested in finding the right fit, then they probably already have somebody they've chosen anyway. And so you're just that second or third bid, which, by the way, just a side note, over the years, I have provided a second or third bid multiple times for companies when I've just asked them point blank, "Are we just a second or third bid? I'm happy to scratch your back on this one. You tell me what the number needs to be, and I can crank one out. I'll copy and paste." And more often than not, they say, "Yeah, that's actually what I need. I appreciate it. Thank you. You just made my job easier because I can just hurry and get that." And great, that's fine, because you know what? Maybe in the future they will come around and say, "Hey, he was awesome they were great to work with and was super nice on that. Maybe this is a fit for them going forward." But so then let's have a conversation. Let's sit down. Let's understand what it is you're really trying. Because I would say, this is very unscientific, but at least half the time the RFP doesn't really show the picture of what they need or what they're trying to get to. And so, it's an opportunity for us to say, well, let's dig in. What does success look like? What is the challenge you're looking? I ask a question often, which is, "Hey, let's say we're getting together in 3 years, just if it was the three of us, hey, the three of us are sitting down in 3 years and everything's been a success. What's that look like? What's happened?" And, for them to then say, "Well, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this." Oftentimes that doesn't match up with what the RFP was asking for. The other piece is, unless you're in procurement, which procurement is the people within big companies that their whole job is just to find whatever it is, products, services, and to get the best deal for the company. Unless you're in procurement, nobody likes RFPs. Even the clients, they don't like it. And so that's the other thing I'll just say to them is, "Do you really want to do the RFP? Is this something that you actually want to do? Do you like RFPs?" "Well, no, not really." "Well, then let's just jump in and let's just sign a discovery scope. Let's start with let's dig in. At the end of that, you can have something that you can actually, whether it's us or somebody else, you at least you're making progress. You haven't wasted 6 weeks or 2 months or whatever it is, your time, your effort, your energy, emotional and physical. And you can then move forward and just actually get going on whatever it is. And I would say for us, the success rate of that conversation is 50+%. Most
Wow.
people just say, yeah, we're doing the RFP because that's what I've always done. I don't know any different. And so, their boss said, let's just, we need to do an RFP. Well, okay, that's what we would. So, by changing that the way that people think about that, it's helped us. It's helped, I think, clients, and I hope it'll help the industry to continue to move, more and more towards getting away from it. And the other piece is look, our experience speaks for ourselves. Go and take a look. If you have any questions about our capabilities, then ask us, and we can send you examples or tell you that's not a fit for us. But that's really what you're basing it on. One other quick thing I will say, and this is if whoever's listening to this, please, if anybody ever asks for spec work, which is, we all cringe when we hear somebody ask for spec work. And if it's something you actually want to go after, then offer this. And I've used this only a handful of times, but ask them this, say, well, okay, how many agencies are participating at this point? So you're asking for this work. Well, 3. Okay. Do you have a not-for-profit or a cause that you support, as a company, or maybe even you as an individual, whatever? Maybe the CEO has something that they like. Sure. Okay, we got this. Okay. How about we all get the same brief, which is to design a homepage or design a campaign for this not-for-profit. We'll work with the not-for-profit. We'll interview them. And at the end of it, now you have this not-for-profit has something amazing that, maybe they wouldn't have otherwise been able to afford or could have done. You've been able to do that for that not-for-profit. And you can judge us all incredibly equally off of our product that we've put out. And so that if that's what you're trying to do is just judge us equally, well, it's almost impossible to judge us equally on some spec work for a business that we may know hardly anything about. We might know something about the industry, but we don't know about your business. One of the other agencies might know a bunch because maybe they have an employee that used to work at that company. It's a very uneven playing field. And I don't want to say not fair because, fair, who cares about fair? I've got 3 kids. I never use the word fair. But it's not, if you're truly trying to get the best fit for your company and for your needs, then you're not going to get, we spend so much time talking to clients and asking them questions and digging in and doing research to really understand them before we ever get to any work, actual, deliverables. And so to not be able to do that ahead of time, you're not judging us off of our best capabilities. So anyway, like I say, if there's ever, and by the way, probably of the half a dozen or 8 or 9 times I've used that, half of them just said, you know what, you're right, and have just worked with us. About another third, half of that half took us up on it, and we did that work. And the other half just said, no, we're not doing that. If you want to participate or not, okay, thank you, no thanks. So
Yeah. No, I think it's great. First of all, I want to say I think maybe you spun up a new product line, which is the cut and paste RFP response, so that you can start charging a service fee for that. For just a low price, $500, we'll just give you what you need to check your box.
That's right. We even have like shell companies that we can put those agency name, different agency names up at the top.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I think you really cracked something there. Also, I mean, you make a ton of good points in there, but like one of the biggest things, and I think it's kind of one of the fatal flaws, at least in RFPs, and it's been some years since I had to deal with them. But because I sort of am of your school of thought, we just don't do it. But back in the olden days when I was working in agency and we had to do those kinds of things, I mean, there's sort of this fatal flaw, which is that in order for any good work to come from something, you almost need to have a conversation. The way these RFPs are sort of structured, they come over and, maybe some of them we've been able to do a little interview or whatever, but you're not getting the in-depth knowledge about what they're actually looking for, right? And they're sort of a lot of times posing almost like a fictitious idea of what it is they need, but it's not really based on anything strategic. It's not a campaign for this or that, or if it is and you're actually building their campaign for them, there's other problems with that. And I've seen instances where I remember one company in particular we did an RFP for that they didn't hire us, but then the work that they did finally produce after they did hire somebody looked strikingly familiar to the work that we had presented. And and so once it's kind of in their hands, I guess they shouldn't. It's probably not ethical, but it's not bizarre that stuff got probably handed off to the new agency, and they were able to use that for inspiration.
Yeah.
So anyway, so there's just a number of problems wrong with it from a structural level, where this RFP process is just, kind of set up, and to your point, for the most part, they already know who they're picking. And then it's
Yeah.
also a little bit selective, and maybe it has to be, because these are largely, bigger agencies, bigger companies, bigger people like this. But like, I remember there was one instance. So when I was in college, I designed a lottery ticket for the Idaho State Lottery, and it was part of a contest, and it won, and they loved it, and it actually became their biggest selling lottery ticket for the year. And so I was really excited about that and all that stuff. So from that point on, they would invite me every few years when their RFP would open up again for creative help. They would reach out to me. Well, I was just a small, one man operation, and then I could kind of augment my services with some freelance help and stuff like that. But just kind of a small shop. And so when they were asking me to create this RFP, and we were going against some of sort of the incumbents in Boise, which is like the Davies Moores and the these kinds of places, those agencies, they're big agencies. They're set up to do this a little better than us. They've got years of experience working with the lottery and stuff like that. But so for me, I just wanted a little corner. Can I just get a little bit of design work out of this? I can't really offer you this whole RFP, but there was no other way in because it was state agency and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So we were sort of hamstrung by being a small agency, in that we just couldn't even participate in these things. And so it makes it really challenging for small agencies to grow, because this used to be kind of the
Oh yeah.
gateway to bigger work.
Yeah.
Um, where I think that this gets really interesting, and maybe you can tell me how this worked. So one of the things that Struck did, and if I screw any of the story up, let me know. I mean, like, I follow Struck, but I'm not like on the newsletter, so I could screw up some of this stuff. But I think one of the big campaigns, and I think that this might have sort of been in the early days of what became sort of this experiential work that you guys are doing these days, was around the Mighty Five campaign. For people who don't know, in Utah, we have 5 big national parks, and I believe Struck is the agency that was sort of behind that Mighty Five campaign.
Yeah.
And so, but I would suspect there may have been an RFP at play. And with that particular campaign, what was so cool about it is some of the experiential work that you guys got to do. There was some big installations at the airport and some other places. And then I think, maybe in about that same time period, you were doing some similar things for some ski resorts and things like that, that were all these big experiential things. And so it seems to me that, just from watching your trajectory, that might have been sort of the early days of this. So can you talk a little bit
Mhm.
about, the Mighty Five campaign, maybe specifically, sort of how that came to be, if you did do RFP, why you chose to do an RFP on that one, and
Yeah.
just sort of how that grew, and then if it did in fact sort of grow you into this experiential work that you're doing these days, maybe we can talk more about that.
Yeah, so Mighty Five, we became the state of Utah agency of record. I think it was about 16 or 17 years ago, which was obviously I think a different time, particularly I think when it came to RFPs. They did want to hire an in-state agency, and Struck was in a uniquely positioned, particularly because there was 2 entities that came together to go after and actually merged. And I don't know a whole lot about the other agency, W Communications, that had some connections there. But yeah, we were able to win the RFP and win the agency of record. We were the agency of record for about 15 years. Um, but when we dug in and really dug into what Utah was struggling with, I mean, we were one of the lowest performing state tourism agencies in the country, which is just bananas when you think of everything that Utah has to offer. But when the research was coming in, people were looking at it, and people would see, Zion or Bryce or whatever, and they would guess, oh, is that Arizona? Oh, is that Colorado?
Yeah.
Is that Nevada? Is that New Mexico? Because there was no, you can see some of those amazing things in those states, and they have, beautiful things. So we needed to create something and tell a story about why we're different and why you come to Utah. And what we did was really created a virtual bucket list for people to say, hey, come and visit the Mighty Five. And, it obviously we were confident in what it could do and the message, but to say it went incredibly well would probably still be underselling it. Utah,
Wow.
for the past, I think, about 7, 8 years, maybe even 10 years, has moved from the lowest, almost the lowest in the country, to number one consistently for invested dollar in return. And the Mighty Five, and was really the big one that put Utah on the map per se, and drove a lot of that because it differentiated. People said, oh, the Mighty Five. I mean, I did a lot of work and still continue to do a lot of work with people in New York, and I would have people when I was out visiting, oh yeah, we're going to Utah this summer. We're doing the Mighty Five. And Utah folks don't really see it because it doesn't advertise here in Utah. But outside of Utah, it was quite well received. And then to your point, we were able to extend that message and extend that by with some installations. The big famous one was in the subway in San Francisco, right off Union Station. It was just really cool as you're walking through it. You kind of are experiencing the arches and some different things of southern Utah. There was a really cool
How
where we bought
how
an old
does
car. Do what?
how does something like that come I mean, like, obviously you had a part of it, but like, are you having a brainstorming meeting with the guys at the state parks and say, "Hey, let's go to San Francisco and we'll paint their subway to look like the arches?" And like, those are some big ideas. They don't just like, I mean, you have to work with the subway in San Francisco to get approval. There's so many
Yeah.
moving parts. It seems daunting, like incredibly hard to kind of make all those pieces come together. Can you maybe talk about the process of A, like coming up with the Mighty Five, B, how do we get this out of Utah into different cities? I'm sure like the San Francisco ploy is like, oh, it's a short flight. They can get here quick. They can do it over
Mhm.
a weekend. They can go back. Maybe that's why you targeted that area. But just the whole, we got X amount of dollars. Let's do something big like that installation there. That had to be so complex to actually make it come to fruition. Can you maybe just talk about
Yeah.
the planning process and how that even came to play?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with the Big Five. In Africa, there's the Big Five, which are the five animals that you want to try and spot and see. And so that was
Oh,
a little bit of the inspiration behind this. And so, the Big Five, but the Mighty, nobody can say otherwise that when you go and you visit these national parks, big words are what sort of you describe them with, because they are. And so, the Mighty Five was again a way to really something bold as a big statement, and also draw attention to that we have five national parks that you can visit in a short span of time. And that was part of the message. You're right in terms of the proximity. The West Coast is a very highly sought after market for the state of Utah tourism entity, and for the state of Utah. And the other piece, so, as there was the brainstorming around that, there was always the thought of how can we, extend this, and what can we do for some shock and awe? Again, we needed to make sure it stood apart and stood out. And so a bit of the strategy there, and it was also in coordination with some PR, was yes, the installation would be there. We wanted a heavily trafficked area, a place that people were going to, clearly millions of people are going through there on a monthly basis. And so there's lots of pictures, there's lots of people, experiencing it that way. But also the press got a hold of it, and it really got a
yeah.
mind of its own, and became, it won sort of all the advertising awards. Which, okay, that's a little bit of a echo chamber, for the advertising world, so it doesn't necessarily help with other things. But it drew a lot of attention of the local press as well as the national press of what they were doing, and wanted to go and experience. And it was a beautiful experience. And so as just part of the brainstorming process, we were trying to figure out how do we show a little bit and give people a little bit of a glimpse of that grandeur that is southern Utah or Utah. And that was one of the concepts, was an installation that would be a kind of a whole tunnel. So as you're walking along, you're kind of getting this overall sense of, wow, how big it is, and how expansive the visiting our state can be. And then, yeah, you start working with different folks. Look, as we all know, everything is for sale. So I'm sure that the subway and the transport of California, of the Bay Area, were happy to, when we brought in a media partner, Love Communications, helped us with the placement of that and helping to secure the the media there, and then put it together. Which, by the way, we had to do it nights and weekends while traffic was still going through it, because you can't shut down a main thoroughfare tunnel. So even just that was a bit of a challenge, but it's a fun challenge. And I would say, in the creative world and the agency space, that's the stuff that we just love, is when you get to
I'm
take a big
sure.
swing. And look, massive credits to the Utah Tourism Board and entity for allowing us to take some of those big swings and to do some stuff that I'm sure, look, it wasn't cheap. And it was a big swing, but it absolutely paid off. And that took some guts on their part. And you love it when you have clients that trust you and say, okay, yeah, let's do it, let's go after this. And so that's another case of just of a great client that you have a good relationship with, and they trust you and you trust them, and you're able to do amazing things together.
That's really cool. Yeah. I'm sure that's one of like 100 projects that you've done over the years that have that kind of feeling for you, where you're like, you get it done and you sit back and you're like, wow, that was 3 years of my life. It's great. Let's do
Yeah,
something else.
yeah. Another one
So,
that a lot of people, especially here in Utah, recognize, but even outside of Utah, is Snowbird, the 1 Star campaign, which that was just fun. And you talk about a brave client, because here we are, we're highlighting a 1 out of 5, and but in a fun, creative way. And that was literally just some of our team sitting here reading reviews, going, 1 star. What are people giving Snowbird a 1 star for? Too much snow,
wow.
too much terrain. We couldn't snowboard it all in one day. I
Wow.
mean, this type of stuff. And I was like, okay, this is gold. This is amazing. And so to lean into that and own it, and also again, it came down to differentiation, because look, the reality is that snow is the same as the snow that's at Alta or at Solitude or at Brighton, and certainly the canyons. And then if you go into Park City, same thing. And so by Snowbird leaning into a little more, we are steep and deep. They went away every single ski resort and snowboard resort at the time was showing a picture of a family swooshing down the mountain and then sitting with hot chocolate by the outside. And we went with kind of the opposite direction, which was, hey, we're steep and deep. If that's what if you're not looking for steep and deep, then don't come here. And it gave this edge. And one of the honestly unintended consequences was it gave their employees a bit of a confidence boost. It's like, yeah, we work at Snowbird. Snowbird is this sort of 1 star mentality of like, yeah, it's not for everybody. Go away if you don't like that stuff. By the way, families still go there all the time, but it attracted the people that were, making those decisions, that were saying, hey, I want to book somewhere and I want steep and deep. And my family, and by the way, there's still great skiing or snowboarding for people of any ages or any abilities. But that differentiation helped them to really, I mean, that blew their business up. That was amazing.
Well,
And
that's
they
amazing to
love it.
take the negative reviews and make it something where you stand out and actually make it
Yeah,
a positive, and you're almost attracting a different clientele that are
totally.
looking for that steep and deep, looking for that kind of like hella skiing kind of vibe, and I'm it's just a unique, let's go through the reviews, let's see what we got, and then let's take these little things and actually enhance them and bring them to the spotlight and go with it, because it's just a unique perspective, a unique take on that scenario. Instead of having the whole family go on a ski lift, you got the dude that's got like he's the skier guy. He's the guy that's going to hit that deep snow, and it's
Yeah.
just
Well, and yeah, I was just going to add that too. I mean, that edge that you're talking about, or sort of the pride that employees could take in their place. I mean, it's almost a challenge issued,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh, don't worry about it. It's too hard for you. It's not a big deal,
Yeah.
And so it almost,
Yeah.
it kind of puts the thumb on people, and
Right.
encourages them to come out and try something harder. Actually, so it's I
Yeah.
remember seeing those boards at least, and yeah, no, it was super creative campaign.
Yeah.
So both of these though are good examples of huge campaigns. And so I wanted to maybe get into a little bit of just sort of your leadership in these situations, right? And sort of the organizational culture of your shop. So one of the things that at least in our research that we uncovered is that you're sort of well known for your sort of collaborative leadership style. Obviously, campaigns like this have, in some cases dozens or hundreds of moving parts. You might be working with vendors in different areas that aren't necessarily employees of your agency, but they're working on behalf of you. So how do you sort of, I guess, what is your philosophy of leadership, and then how do you sort of expand that or sort of install that culture across your teams?
You know, I really feel like you find the right people and you let them do what they do best. And, you get out of their way. And, I'm the furthest from a micromanager. I don't like it. I don't think you get the best work from people. I think that, again, I can't do what a lot of this team can do. And I don't have those skills. I don't have the capabilities. And so, by empowering them, and it's such an overused word, and I actually cringe when I say it. It's like, oh, I want to empower my people. But by just, I think that But really, it's easy to say, but we've all worked with people who say, "Oh, I empower my teams," and they don't. They don't actually. The proof is not there. They don't actually do that. And I would hope that the team here always feels like they have the ability to do what they need to do. They have the ability to push the boundaries, and we ask them to push the boundaries. And look, that's what agencies are hired because a client can't do something in house. We've had multiple clients where we've gone in and we've proposed something, and they've chosen us over others because they said, look, we'd rather have a horse that we have to rein in a little bit as opposed to a horse you would have to kick and try and get to go a little faster. The same as here. I'd rather have to say, hey, okay, great, love it, but we need to probably rein this in a little bit. But let's push the boundaries. Let's push that. And so, by letting them know that, and then supporting them when they do present something that is a little out there, or is a little unique or different, or maybe controversial. Great. That's how I prove that they are actually have that power to do what they're doing. And again, I think it's just making sure we have the right people. I'll tell you that the Struck hiring process and vetting process is amazing. And I thought I did it well at my last agency. Not even close. What we do here, and the way that we onboard people, and the way that there's this really kind of the Struck way and the Struck culture, is phenomenal. And I have to credit lots of people on the team who have put that together. And look, next year Struck is celebrating 30 years. And so, there's a lot of history there, and there's a lot of great things to recognize. I'm not a business book person. I really am not. But of course, I lean in a couple of times and read some. And probably the most impactful book that I've read in recent decade or even decades is the Extreme Ownership, which if you've read it, it's written by a couple of ex-Navy SEALs. And they tell the story. They tell stories of their actual, they were in Iraq. They were largely credited with turning around what was going on in Iraq at the time. I tend to learn from sort of examples and then principles, and that's what they do. It's example of they tell a story, which of course is just, it's all crazy and fascinating. But then they have a principle, and then that principle in action. That each principle is sort of taught that way. But the idea of extreme ownership of, look, I have to own everything here. I'm the ultimate, I have to own. If one of my team does something wrong or falls down somewhere, that's on me. I need to own that. And that builds a lot of trust with your team. When I'm not a finger pointer. I don't try and find fault with people. I don't want to do that. I've never seen anything good come out of it. So, by having them know that I have their back, that I will also own that. Now, look, if it continues to happen, well, then, okay, we have to have a conversation. We have to make a change in what we're doing. But if we as an agency took a big swing, or we did something and it didn't go well, or even went badly, ultimately that's on me, and I need to own that. And I'll tell you, the team here, they really appreciate when I say, no, look, I could have done this better. And like, no, Andrew, you weren't really that much involved in this. Like, yeah, but I could have given better direction, or I could have done this, or I could have done that. And then all of a sudden they're saying, yeah, but I could have done this, and maybe next time. And all of a sudden it turns into this positive, like, okay, great, let's look at ways we can do better next time, or do this, run something differently. And so, I think again, it's more about just showing the team that they have the ability to go and push the limits and do these different things than it is saying it. And hopefully I demonstrate that every day.
Well, yeah, and I think that that's exactly what you were alluding to at the beginning, when you're using a word like empowered, which, I know is kind of one of these buzzy terms, but it became buzzy because there's a lot of people that say it and don't do it.
Don't do anything.
And so,
Yeah.
So if you can actually not say it because it is already known, or it's become part of the culture of the shop that you work in, or the company that you're building, that's a huge win. And so,
Yeah.
and I think, especially in the spirit of extreme ownership, I mean, it's a real put up or shut up kind of idea. I mean, the point is that we do what we say, and we don't need to go around telling everybody, because we're just known for the action we take. And so, whether that's an extension of the work that you guys are producing at Struck, or whether that's the way that you're leading the company, infusing that sort of culture, throughout the company, I think is going to make for a better team, stronger team, and a team that's actually empowered to do great work. Having been on teams that are either hamstrung by clients or hamstrung by account managers that aren't willing to, offer up something risky to a prospective client. I mean, there's so many things that sort of stifle creativity. But I guess having the security in your employment and understanding that you're going to be able to do something, exciting and not be punished for it, I think really opens up the boundaries creatively. And, I was actually just thinking about that as it pertains to on your back wall behind you for people who are watching this are a couple prints from a Nickelodeon campaign you guys did a million years ago. And same thing. Some of that, the work that you guys did for that was really outrageous. And I have to imagine that working for, at least culturally, it seems that Nickelodeon is probably a fun client and they're a little bit out there. But
Yeah.
they're also a big corporation, so I don't know how much
Yeah.
nudging that took. But I don't know if you have any insights or are interested in talking about that experience at all.
Well, yeah, you know what? We brought different thinking to them, and of course, they're a studio or a company of incredibly creative people. But sometimes it's the old stupid saying of the cobbler in their own shoes and those different things. So we brought different thinking, and we were able to push them in some different directions and some different ways of looking at it, and it went so well that they actually their CEO at the time reached out to us, and they were look they're one of the big animation studios down there. There's them, there's Pixar, there's Disney Animation Studios, there's Universal's, DreamWorks, and they were struggling with recruiting and retention. They'd loved the different thinking that we brought to some of their characters and some of their advertising, some of their package design. We did some package design that stood out on the shelves. And so what ended up happening was we redesigned their whole corporate headquarters
Wow.
in Burbank,
Did that
and
kind
took
of
it from
stir up your? Did that kind of open the doors to the?
yeah.
Okay, I was wondering if they were
That was really the
the
first
client that kind of
really
got that
big
going.
project that led
Yeah,
to what we now call structure, which
yeah.
is just a separate discipline, which is this physical space work that we do. And look, according to the CEO himself, we that work and what we did there led to a 30% reduction, 30+% reduction in their recruiting and retention costs, which for a
Huh.
company that
What
size, that's massive dollars.
what were some things that you did to their headquarters that helped with retention? Because you wouldn't think that like the a standing desk would make that big of a difference, but it might. You know.
And what we did was largely around inspiration, around paying homage to the those who had walked the halls of Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon really, they don't get the credit, I think, for pushing the boundaries of animation like they deserve. In the sense of when SpongeBob comes out and some of these other characters that they come out, they were not your normal animation. They were very different. They were unique. They were very creative. And so, a lot of what we did was to extend that brand and show the story of the brand through, their main lobby, through the main hallways that employees walk through every day, that showed a lot of those people who had been there in the past and a lot of that work, and highlighted it, and made it a place that people were so excited to go and bring their family or friends, and because like, wow, I work in this place that is so incredible and has this incredible history. We did a outdoor park area where they kind of, the employees can go out and sit, and did all these big like totem poles that, big sort of sculptures for this that again go back to the characters and the history of Nickelodeon. So a lot of different types of work that really just made it this inspiring, engaging, exciting place, and not just sort of another corporate office. If you're in animation, you probably like to have something different and unique. What's fun about that is it actually led to Disney Animation Studios asked us to come
Wow.
and help them with their animation studios, because then they started to fall behind. So we helped them with some work in their studio, and then very exciting for us, we just started this work. Disney Imagineering reached out to us and said, "Hey, we need you to come and help us with our Imagineering offices," and which I mean, in a lot of ways, that to me is like holy grail. Imagineering we all look up to as just this incredible group of people that have come up with some of the most iconic things, especially in the Disneyland parks and those places. And so to do, to work with them and for them to, I mean, they reached out to us. We were the only people they talked to. And so that's a case of somebody saying, wow, you guys are good at what you do. And, we're building a couple of buildings from the dirt up at Lagoon
Wow.
right now and here in Utah one's a candy store and the other's a ice cream parlor. And, to say these are Disney level, Disney worthy type experiences is an understatement. They are going to be incredibly beautiful, incredibly just, I mean, they're amazing. And Lagoon could not be more thrilled with what we're doing for them. So much so that We're now helping them redesign their whole entrance experience. We're helping them redesign their helping them design a new sort of themed area of the park. So a lot of fun, working with them, and that's a client that trusts us and has really, sort of empowered us to push the limits of creativity and an experience that's going to drive a lot of, engagement for their customers. And through all this work, one of the things, this is one of the most exciting things that the last sort of 3, 4, 5, 6 months, I spent a lot of time just really trying to understand where we should be taking structure and this sort of not new offering because it's been around for a long time, but this newly defined sort of to tell the story. And starting in less than 2 weeks is our first architect. We'll have an
Wow.
architect on staff,
I was going to
which will
actually
help
ask
us
you that.
really to it changes the dynamic dramatically. And most big developers will tell you that architecture firms, I mean, they're amazing. They're very good at what they do, obviously, but they oftentimes think that they can do what we do from the creative side, and they just don't. They're very good at core and shell. They're very good at doing those things that obviously have to happen, but a lot of big developers now will actually hire two different firms. One architecture firm that's sort of core and shell, and then another that is meant to try and make it a little more of an engaging, creative space. And
But then
that's
you're
so
then you're
important for,
fighting each other the whole time because he's thinking
yeah,
one thing and you're thinking another. He's thinking on the logical side and you're thinking on the creative side, and trying to get them to work together is rough.
right,
But having your in-house guy that's done it before and can actually
yeah.
kind of concept the engineering side around the creative side, that's got to be a game changer. That's got to be just night and
Yeah,
day, to have that there. So it
it's going
reminds
to be
me,
huge for us.
we had a guest on, oh, probably a few months ago. I can't remember his name, but he came from the theater side of things. He did Broadway, he did lighting and
Mm,
sound and stuff like that. And he realized that he could take his talent in Broadway and create a sales presentation, like an actual, like he's working for Nike and he does this whole
mm.
rebrand of the shoe, and it's a user experience that they walk them through their store. And he was it Foot Locker he did a lot with, where he
Yeah, he did
came in
Foot
and
Locker, and it's a lot of this kind of stuff that you're talking about, this experiential design, and really figuring out how to not just make things, great marketing or great advertising, but instead it's actually an experience that people can enjoy and be a part of. And and it's funny how you're talking about it just leads to additional retention and other things like this that is really just being driven by the way you feel. I mean, at the end of the day, HR
Yeah,
is HR, your paycheck's your paycheck, whatever, but you feel good coming to work. And that bit, I think makes all the difference.
yeah,
so,
for sure. I mean, it really is, and it's you think about, you go to a restaurant, and we all know restaurants that just have a different experience. They just have a different feel, and you feel it when you walk in. You feel it while you're there, and then you go to another one where you just, oh boy, the food better be really good, because otherwise, I don't know why I'm here.
yeah.
Not a really great experience, or something unique that just stands apart. You don't really, how often do you take a picture of a wall or of a, something cool at a place, that
The
is just
Chino band
normal.
the
Yeah, I
Chino
mean, you're not taking a picture of the
Bandito,
walls of Cheesecake Factory, right? Like, look, I love
yeah.
Cheesecake Factory as much as the next guy, but you go into one Cheesecake Factory, you've gone to them all. I mean, they're all exactly the same. There's nothing in there that's sort of unique or different, other than their huge book of a menu. But it's nothing. Doesn't really stand out, and that's why you go to Disneyland or you go to Universal Studios or whatever, and every restaurant is different and unique, and you get people taking pictures of the wall and posting it. Well, you're still just in a restaurant. You're still just in a place to just get a food and beverage. But now you're taking pictures and showing people and saying this cool experience, this unique thing that I get to do or sit in or be a part of. That's that's fun, and that's where people really do engage and want to come back. They want to tell their friends. They want to be part of that in one way or another. Whether that's just patronage for the long term, or want to bring friends and experience with others.
Yeah. No, well, and it's interesting too. Like, so I was, a big fan when they built the new Adobe complex down in Lehigh. So I say new, it's not that new anymore, but like they had hired an artist that I love to do a wall inside their facility, right? And so, like,
Right.
even though I didn't work there, anything, I was doing all I could to get inside Adobe just so I could go take a picture of this
Yeah.
wall, and it's exactly what you're talking about.
Well,
Mike, the
one
the guy that,
example.
yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
just one example of the Adobe building is that the staircase where they have the balls that you can take. You can pick up some balls at the bottom, and they have that little rail system that you can then put a
Huh.
ball in the top, and it goes down and does this kind of fun, cool, stuff. And that's they didn't need that. That doesn't somehow pencil in the sense of like, oh well, we put this thing here, and our creative suite is going to improve, or our experience cloud stuff is going to improve. You can't quantify that, but it is unique and people remember it. And also from a health and wellness standpoint, one of their things was actually to get people to want to walk the stairs. So
Yeah.
that was a little bit of the driver behind it was, yeah, you pick up a ball at the bottom and you take it up and you can actually drop it in on any of the floors. But it is. I've done it multiple times. It's kind of fun. It's like, all right, the kid in me loves that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So
no, it's very cool. And in fact, Mike, I just wanted to say that the person that Mike was referencing is a guy named Jason Friedman. He came on a few months
Oh,
ago. He runs a company called
oh,
CX Formula,
very
and
good.
okay.
those guys do a lot of experiential work and things like that too. So just shout out to him since Mike brought him up. Here
Yeah.
in the closing couple minutes, I wondered if we could just take a quick minute and talk about sort of the future in terms of what what trends you're seeing in advertising and marketing and things like that. I can see that you guys are sort of not necessarily based on an industry wide trend, but you're definitely moving in a new direction based on what you're seeing in your own business. What do you think is happening sort of in the world of marketing, advertising? How do you see things moving? And I think maybe we've talked about it, which is sort of experience versus, your traditional advertising. I just wonder if you had any thoughts to close on.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the experience economy sort of movement, and a lot of people think of the experience economy as travel, right? You're going to go and experience a different country or a different location or a different thing, whatever that is. And I believe firmly that the experience economy really goes much further than that, in the sense of it is your office space, it is your the restaurant or hospitality or theme park or whatever that is. It's all about, again, an experience that drives that emotion, that drives an action, and those are always very different. But it still comes back to, and I think this is where the what's the I mess up the saying, but the death of this has been greatly exaggerated. Whatever the death of for years and years and years we've heard of the death of software development is imminent because of this new tool or this new thing.
Because
The death of creative
ChatGPT
is,
can do it for me.
yeah, right. And so it still comes back to, you've got to have a strong brand. The brand has to be in a good spot. And really everything that Struck does just goes back to a strong, well-grounded, well thought out brand. And then everything we do is the extension of that brand. It's extending that brand to the web. It's to campaigns. It's to billboards. It's to physical spaces. And the fact is like yes, AI is dramatically changing the world, and people are freaking out. And guess what? If you're not going to embrace it, then you probably will be one of those casualties that will see some things. But the other piece is because everybody has access to AI, it comes back to the human element. We still have to be able to take that human element and do things with it. you know, we use AI here every day. Nothing that goes to the clients because, that there's a whole mess there that still has to be worked out in the courts from a copyright and trademarks and all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff. But it's a great inspiration tool. It's a great starter. If you're not using it, well, gosh, then, you're not taking advantage of a super powerful tool. So, I think it still comes back to, and this is where I'm really, again, very bullish on the experience and brand transformation piece is you still have to have that strong brand. And then how do you take that brand and make it work for you in the most powerful and best ways and efficient ways? Because I tell people all the time that yes, digital marketing is incredible, and if you have a weak brand, you have to way overspend to tell your story because you got this weak brand. If you have a strong brand, you really don't have to work as hard. You look at some of the iconic brands. I mean, Tesla's a good example. Like them, hate them, whatever. They don't advertise. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because they've done a good job of telling their brand story through their products, through a Tesla going to space. all these things. They've done a really good job of that, of just making their brand strong. Apple for years and years and years notoriously didn't advertise, or very little. They didn't do it, a lot of it. Well, why? Because they built products that people like to talk about and wanted to be a part of. And so there again, it comes back to, and I think this is where, going forward, it's still, with all the changes that are going to happen in the world, all the changes that are happening with technology, whatever, it still comes back to, you've got to have a good, strong brand and all the elements that go with that, and then find ways to tell that brand story in an engaging, exciting, unique, whatever the word is, way, that then makes you stand apart, makes people say, "Oh, I want to be part of that, or I want to engage with that, or do something, whatever that is that you want to do." So, um, I'm super excited. I think that the structure piece of our business is fantastic, and really is just another extension of what we're doing. But I also think that there is going to be a lot of opportunities for a lot of agencies to lean into different parts and different ways of that brand extension and find something that they can do really well or better than others. And so, again, I think the death of creative agencies has been, dramatically overstated or exaggerated. And I think there's, it's because it still comes back to, if everybody has AI, then nobody has it, and we all,
Yeah.
it's a level playing field again.
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, really, as long ago as 2019, I was doing a lot of heavy writing on this, which is, I sort of was framing it in the way, or as reaching a technological saturation point, because I, as a guy doing marketing and advertising, had become sort of disenfranchised with just the ubiquitousness of, web ads and things like that, and
Yeah.
it just, for me, it wasn't scratching an itch anymore. That was what the creative thing was supposed to be, right? It was supposed to be a way that you feel about a thing, or, the way that, the creative application of stuff, and you get caught up in doing this commoditized work and everything. I suspect that's where AI will live, is in something like that. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that, AI, no AI, whatever, there's always going to be human advantage in that the AI isn't building anything, at least not yet.
Right.
They're not, designing the campus for Disney, or, I mean, it's not going to be there yet. Maybe
Right.
eventually they can hand it off to some robot who will do it for us. But I think we've got a little time
Sure.
left as humans. So I think the more we focus on those human relationships, the better off we'll be.
Yeah.
So I guess then we're sort of at the end of the hour. If where can people track you down online, learn a little bit more about Struck and places like that, maybe find you on LinkedIn, etc.
Yeah, struck.com, just as it sounds, and structure, which is spelled uniquely, so you can find it through struck.com, but it's STRTKR. So same letter count, same everything. That's what we were going for. .com, but I'm on LinkedIn. Andrew Howlett is what it is on there. Nothing, no special characters or anything else. But yeah, engage with us. Come and walk around the studio. Come and walk in and let's chat. And, especially we love all the time, especially like students. We have a good relationship with the University of Utah, and to a lesser extent with the BYU Ad Lab team. We've got some alumni of both, a lot of alumni of both working here, and so love it when people want to come, and especially like I say, students who are looking to try and figure out what they want to do and how they can make the biggest impact. And so always love that. And yeah, but those are the places to find us.
Yeah, and just as a guy who's been perpetually a brand cop, I will always drive people to you guys. I think it's, if you're interested, if you have a business and you're listening to this, you want to learn about how to grow your company through brand development and that sort of thing, I encourage you to reach out to, or at least check out what they're doing. So they've always been
Thank you.
a exciting and inspirational agency here in the area. So
Thank you.
anyway, so thanks so much for your time, Andrew. Really appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great
really,
to
really
chat with
enjoyed
you
the
guys and to learn a little
conversation.
bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. We'll see you guys next time.